Good evening. Our top story tonight, the prince is gone. Moses, son of Pharaoh's daughter, once hailed as the heir to Egypt's throne, has vanished.
Sources within the palace confirmed that after slaying an Egyptian overseer near the slave yards, Moses fled into the wilderness earlier this morning. His whereabouts remain unknown. One Hebrew, one Egyptian, one moment of rage that could reshape the empire. We'll take you inside the story.
Tonight we ask, how did we get here? Who is Moses really? And what threat, if any, do the Hebrews pose? From the slave pits of Goshen to the golden halls of Pharaoh's court, to the desolate Midianite frontier, this is the untold story behind Egypt's greatest crisis.
Coming up, who was Pharaoh? Who was the Pharaoh who knew not Joseph? What does ancient prophecy say about this hour? And who are the midwives who defied genocide?
Stay with us as Exodus Now begins.
We begin tonight with a shockwave rippling through the royal court and slave camps alike. Moses, the royal son of Pharaoh's daughter, is now the most wanted man in Egypt.
His crime? The killing of an Egyptian overseer, reportedly in defense of a Hebrew slave. The body was discovered buried in the sand yesterday evening.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm standing just outside the eastern pits of Goshen, where the ground was disturbed only hours ago. The burial site of one Egyptian taskmaster who is unnamed but well known to the local Hebrews here for what one source called brutality without restraint. Eyewitnesses say Moses, a man who is trained in the arts of war and the wisdom of Egypt, stepped back and struck the man. The overseer fell, and so did the dynasty's illusion. What I've been told is that whispers turned into accusations, and by mid-afternoon, Pharaoh himself had issued the decree: Moses must die. The murder has stirred some deep fears of revolt, with some officials painting Moses as a revolutionary, a Hebrew Messiah figure.
But is that who Moses is?
Or was?
Sources say the prince lived with his secret for nearly 24 hours before it became known, and when he tried to mediate a dispute between two Hebrews the next day, he was rejected. One of the Hebrew men is quoted to have told Moses, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" That was the moment Moses knew the truth was out.
According to Egyptian law, the penalty was death, but Moses fled before the guards could reach his chambers.
He is believed to be heading east toward the Midianite border, a perilous journey through a land few Egyptians dare to enter. Some are calling this a fall from grace, others the beginning of prophecy fulfilled. When we return, who was Moses before the flight? And why would a prince turn against the palace?
The story is older than you think. Stay with us. While the nation reels from today's breaking events, tonight we are learning new details about the secret Moses has carried since birth and the extraordinary woman who saved him. Sources confirm what many have long whispered in the alleys of Goshen. Prince Moses is not Egyptian by blood. He is Hebrew. Rachel, let's see the report that you prepared for us earlier today from Goshen.
I'm here in the heart of Goshen, where just decades ago, Pharaoh issued one of the most consequential decrees in Egyptian memory. Every Hebrew male child was to be thrown into the Nile. One mother, Jochebed, wife of Amram, refused. For 3 months, she hid her child. Our sources say she called him good, a child marked by divine favor. When hiding became impossible, she made a desperate choice: to float her baby down the Nile in a papyrus basket sealed with pitch, placing him in the reeds directly in the path of Pharaoh's daughter. Egyptian sources confirm that the princess Hatshepsut, daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose, took the child and named him Moses, meaning drawn out.
But this wasn't just charity. It was calculated. Hebrew informants tell Exodus now that Jochebed herself was hired to nurse the child under royal protection. A Hebrew raising her son inside Pharaoh's own palace. And no one knew?
Or perhaps someone did. For 40 years, Moses was trained as a prince, but also as a Hebrew. Insiders claim he never forgot where he came from.
And now, that knowledge may have cost him everything.
I remember her, Jochebed, quiet, strong. When we heard her son lived, it gave us hope. She risked everything. And now, her son risks everything again, not as Pharaoh's son, but as one of us.
The question now, will the truth of Moses' birth lead him back to deliver his people, or doom him in exile?
And what role did the Hebrew midwives play in preserving an entire generation, including Moses?
We investigate their resistance. Next.
As tonight's story continues to unfold, we want to hear from you, our viewers across Egypt and beyond. It's time for Scroll Questions.
We've gathered your reactions on Parchment, Tablet, and Whisper Network.
Here's one we're asking tonight. Would you risk your future to defend someone oppressed, even if it cost you your position, your status, your life?
Moses made his choice. But what would yours be? Why do you think Moses, a member of the royal household, chose to identify with the oppressed Hebrews rather than remain in the comfort of Pharaoh's court?
Another one coming in from a scribe in Memphis. How do we live faithfully in unjust systems without becoming complicit?
Big questions tonight, and we are not the only ones asking.
Up next, we are joined by our expert panel to unpack the tension between identity and loyalty, power and principle.
And we'll ask, did Moses abandon Egypt or answer a call from somewhere higher?
Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary evening. With Moses gone, Egypt stares into a mirror, and so do the Hebrews. Let's start with you, Hezekiah. The palace raised Moses. But who raised the man we saw strike down an overseer?
Well, records say that he was raised by 2 nations, one in shadow. His mother nursed him while whispering stories that Pharaoh couldn't hear. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was the first name he ever learned.
So even inside the palace, he never truly left Goshen.
Well, I don't think so. No, not in spirit, and, well, not in soul. The Bible in the book of Hebrews 11 verse 24 says that he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter.
You want to understand what made this possible? start here with a name our people forgot: Joseph. The new Pharaoh, Amos I, a unifier, yes, but paranoid of Semites. He rose after overthrowing the Hyksos kings, who were, like Joseph, foreigners with influence.
A Pharaoh who knew not Joseph.
Knew and didn't want to?
You see, Ben and Rachel, it's no coincidence that slavery begins right there.
Not policy. Fear. The Hebrews reminded the throne of a time it had nearly lost Egypt.
And what does that mean for Moses? Does it mean that the fight in his blood was older than him? I hear Pharaoh trained him to be a god, or did his conscience call him to be a servant? Some say he was destined to rule Egypt.
Well, Rachel, that's not what heaven saw. Heaven saw a deliverer in exile, not a king in a crown.
So, was this a betrayal of Egypt or an act of faith?
I think both, and that's what makes it dangerous. He chose a higher loyalty. A temple theologian by the name Eliyahu ben Shaphat told me that. According to Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 25, he chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God. Tonight, he suffers alone.
Royal blood, Hebrew heart, a nation divided and a man undone. Thank you, panelists.
Still ahead, the women who defied Pharaoh's orders. Are midwives the new resistance? And what ancient voices are rising in defense? With Moses now in hiding, the ink is drying fast across Egyptian press scrolls, and the reaction is as divided as the nation itself. First up, the Goshen Chronicle, headlined, "A Hebrew Among Us, Prince or Traitor?" Their editorial raises the question that many in the camps are now whispering aloud. Did Pharaoh raise his own undoing?
We are not surprised the prince ran. We are surprised it took this long. When a man sees injustice and still eats at Pharaoh's table, he loses something greater than his crown.
Strong words, but not all agree. In the Memphis Sentinel, Pharaoh's council defends the national security decree, warning that the Hebrew birth rate has grown beyond containment. One quote reads, "He was raised Egyptian, he should have remained loyal." But the scroll that caught our attention, this one, it's a publication distributed weekly among synagogues, known simply as the Study Guide. This week's issue, Oppression and the Birth of Moses, traces how God's promises never left his people, even in forced labor. It asks us, not as politicians or priests, but as people, what does it mean to live with faith inside a corrupt empire? In moments of uncertainty, scrolls do more than record the news. They preserve the promise.
Still ahead, defying death with life. The midwives who stood against the most powerful empire on earth.
Resistance wears many robes. Sometimes it wears linen and courage.
Well, the palace isn't the only place that is buzzing tonight. The people are speaking in scrolls, wax tablets, public graffiti walls, and messenger dials flying faster than gossip. Our top trending glyph, no surprise, hashtag justice or treason. A social media user here by the name @scribe2freedom writes, "About time someone stood up for us. If this is treason, let the sun speak." Meanwhile, another user here, @lotusborn from Thebes says, "Raised in the palace, Now he slays one of our own. He is no prince. He is a traitor. Opinion is split. Among the Hebrews, there's rising chatter about destiny. Some calling Moses the Drawn One, a name they now link with ancient prophecy. And trending fast, hashtag drawn out and hashtag son of two worlds. But not all scrolls are poetic. In darker corners of the feed, we are seeing posts comparing Moses to Joseph. Some wonder, will this exile end in famine or freedom? One last scroll tonight, anonymous but powerful.
Thank you, Hezekiah. When we return, how ordinary women defied death with life. The Hebrew midwives take center stage.
Courage doesn't always come from kings. Sometimes it comes from bath chairs. Tonight's breaking event, the flight of Moses, didn't happen in a vacuum. It struck the heart of a fragile empire built on labor, fear, and the memory of a foreign threat. First, the numbers. The Hebrews now make up over 50% of Egypt's labor force in Lower Egypt. Brickmaking, harvesting, granary construction, entire supply lines depend on unpaid Hebrew labor. Now consider this. 70 years ago, this group was small, invited in, honored as guests during the time of Joseph. But when Amos I took the throne, the rules changed. He had defeated the Hyksos, foreign rulers of Semitic origin, and suddenly Hebrews felt like a threat. The fear wasn't just rebellion, it was identity. A fear that someone from the other side could rise again from within Egypt's own house. Enter Moses, raised in royalty, born a Hebrew. When he killed the overseer, he shattered more than a man. He shattered the illusion that Egypt's control was unchallenged. Experts now warn that this incident may spark wider unrest. There's also the question of divine loyalty. Pharaoh claims divine sonship of Ra, but the Hebrews follow a God who remembers covenants, even in captivity. So tonight, we ask, was this a personal act of justice or the first crack in the empire's wall? Egypt's future now depends on how Pharaoh responds, because whether Moses returns or not, something has shifted. And nothing breaks quietly forever.
Powerful insight. Thank you, Ben. When we return, the story of two women who feared God more than Pharaoh, the midwives who said no. Tonight, amid political fury and the royal scandal, we turn our focus to two women who changed history, not with swords or scrolls, but with a decision. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah, Hebrew midwives, devoted, discreet, and defiant against the most powerful empire on earth. When Pharaoh issued the decree that all male Hebrew infants must be killed at birth, they said no. Not to his face, but in the tent, at the birth stool, in every whispered breath of resistance. We spoke with women in Goshen earlier this evening. Here's what they had to say.
My son lives because of them. They set aside their fears and undertook a task that the Lord our God commanded them to carry out.
They didn't just risk their lives. They defied Pharaoh and delivered our future.
One of them looked at me and said, "This child is sacred. We all are." These women stood between death and life, between a tyrant's fear and a mother's hope. They didn't just save our sons, they preserved a promise.
The official report filed to Pharaoh The Hebrew women are too vigorous. They give birth before we arrive. It was a lie. And in that lie lived faith and protest, and the seed of a deliverer. The empire wanted silence. They chose life. And tonight, long after Pharaoh's name is forgotten, their names are still spoken with reverence. Remember this: Moses was not the first act of deliverance. He was the echo. They were the first cry. Tonight, the world feels like it's cracked open. A prince has fled, people remain enslaved, and somewhere in a wilderness not yet named, a calling is waiting to speak. From the sacred writings of the prophet scribes, Moses had been learning much that he must unlearn. He was not ready in Pharaoh's palace. He was ready when he lost everything. He thought he had failed. He thought it was over. But heaven does not use the same clocks as kings. When Moses chose to leave Pharaoh's court, he wasn't escaping, he was beginning. He turned his back on the dazzling prospects of wealth and greatness and chose instead the life of a shepherd, a deliverer yet unseen. If you feel small tonight, if you feel forgotten, remember, so did Moses. But God saw, and God still does. Good night. Keep watching. The wilderness is not the end. It's where deliverance begins.